inferni, anima traduce verdusi, sitivi terror, corpus hominis, sitivi ormidi, magodei, non resista, per morere, discedere, famula ista, voglian con qui Cristi nomi da abitare.
Io sono Satana! Basta!
Lui, e poi qui re, destro, qui da lì, qui, ragazzi di terra esteriore. Voi divi come ministri qui sempre con la presentare, se qui turbolente renigno, qui temeraria depressa, Reus onnipotenti Deo, cui statuta transgressus lex, Reus Spiritu Santo Parat.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to The Dead Shall Talk. This is going to be MP Paranormal's podcast type show. We're going to be talking about the paranormal, some esoteric topics, and whatever's interesting us at the time or whatever's hot topics. But today, before we get into the main topic, Dylan, what I kind of want to talk about is how do you feel about exorcisms? How do you feel about exorcists? Do you think it's real? Do you think there's any validity to exorcisms in the Catholic Church and kind of what's going on there? Do you think it's more of a ploy to scare people? Like, what's your take on that personally?
Interestingly enough, I mean, you know me, like I wasn't religious in like any shape or form before I got into the paranormal. And I think you have that same story. Faith ideologies had switched, getting deep in the weeds of what we do. So I think now, yes, I think that exorcisms are a real thing. I mean, the only reason I say that is because now I believe that demons have, well, one, are real, and two, have the ability to control people. So long answer, yes, I think they're real. They're not meant to scare people.
Right. I kind of have the same type of mindset. I wouldn't say I've ever seen an exorcism, which, it's not really a show or a spectacle. It's more of a rite, as we're going to go into a little bit later. But I know you have some experiences or some stories kind of being a tour guide at Hill House, don't you?
Yeah. One in specific that I can think about was, I think it was a New Year's event that I wasn't there. So Ryan, as y'all have seen in our other videos from Mineral Wells, he was there, right, as well as Sonny, a good friend of mine, the owner of one of the owners of Hill House. And basically there was a guy that was upstairs and he was walking around the attic and he said that he didn't like feel good. Like the last thing that they remember him saying was like, "Oh yeah, I don't feel good." And then he started acting all weird and so on and so forth. I don't have like the deep, like full bone story about it, but basically the guy was acting like completely like outside of himself. And what had happened is they didn't get the warm and fuzzies that he was being himself. So they went upstairs with a cross, and Sonny was performing this prayer on him. And as he was putting the cross to the chest of this gentleman, he said it felt like, I'm gonna just say what he said. He felt like he's like the hand of God was like pushing his hand into his chest. Like he felt his sternum moving. He was pressing so hard with the cross, and the dude just like his like eyes rolled back in his head, and then he just like fell to the floor. And when they lifted his shirt up, he had like scorch marks. It wasn't like branding, but it was just like how's the best way to explain it? Like dusting, like a black dusting, like where this metal cross was on his chest. It was pretty wicked. I wish I would have seen it, but I wasn't there for it, unfortunately.
Sonny, that's not just anybody performing an exorcism. Sonny's actually a minister or a pastor, isn't he?
No, Kathy is the ordained minister.
Kathy's the ordained minister. So Sonny was just stepping in and kind of help this guy out who's being a little overwhelmed at Hill House then.
Yeah, and it speaks volumes to the fact that you don't have to be necessarily a certified exorcist like the individual we're going to be talking about here in a minute, but just having that faith in whatever you believe in to drive these negative forces out of whatever they're possessing or controlling.
Definitely. With that being said, Sonny kind of performed a mild exorcism, I guess you could say, at Hill House. We're going to be talking about somebody was working with the Pope in the Catholic Church for a very long amount of time. We're going to be delving deep into the fascinating world of Father Gabriel Amorth, also known as the Pope's exorcist.
Yeah, so For those of you that don't know who Father Amorth is, he was a major figure in the field of exorcism. Um, he has said to have performed over 10,000 exorcisms in his lifetime. Um, so definitely deserves a closer look to look at someone of this caliber and their story and the things that they said about exorcisms. But I think we should kind of talk about maybe where he came from before being an exorcist.
Definitely. And, what kind of inspired us to kind of talk about him is just recently the Pope's Exorcist came out and hit theaters. I
Mm.
went out and saw it. I thought it was great. It's obviously dramatized. It's not when exorcists occur, they're not, these crazy things that you see in Hollywood. It's just Hollywood. But some of the things that transferred over from that movie, they transferred over directly from his life. So it's based on a true story, right?
Yeah.
But basically, Father Amort was born in 1925 in Modena, Italy. Interestingly enough, before he embarked on this spiritual journey of his, he was actually a part of the Italian resistance during World War II, and he was fighting against fascism. There was a cataclysmic event within the war. He actually pretended to be dead, and he never forgave himself. He had survivor's guilt from that point forward.
Oh, like he
Um,
pretended to be dead in combat, so he wouldn't.
Yeah, so
Oh.
they got ambushed, and a squad totally sprayed them all in the back, and he just hit the ground. And he remembers waking up, and there was a little red bird that was chirping like on top of his cap, and that's kind of what brought him back.
When
But yeah, but ever since then, he always had kind of survivor's guilt, and he always felt like he had to give back.
Mm.
So that's what kind of started his spiritual journey. He thought he should have died in that time, and he didn't. So
So
he officially became an exorcist in 1986, appointed by Cardinal Ugo Poletti, and he was the Vicar General of Rome. Now, Dylan, do you know anything about Father Amort's belief about the devil and possession? I know he had a very particular way of thinking about the devil, and it was actually kind of not popular during his time being an exorcist at the Vatican.
yeah, because I think a lot of people view the devil as kind of like this symbolic figure. Like, we think about this like red man with a pitchfork and a tail and a snake's tongue, right? But what differed from the public opinion to his opinion was that he believed that it wasn't just a symbol, like the devil, like Lucifer, actually, is a fallen angel, is the devil, is a real entity that can possess people. Um, I think that from what he was saying, that he believed that the interactions of the devil and demonic forces were on the rise as the belief system and faith systems were kind of declining in global population. And we see it today, and to whoever doesn't believe in God or have a religious ideology, there's nothing wrong with that. But he believed that because of that, that people were losing faith in the Catholic Church, that the interactions of demons and the devil were on the rise. And he also thought that the inner, how should I say, the amount of materialism that we were starting to
Hmm.
get to in the Western world and the world all over the place was really rising. That interaction of negative spirits and demonic forces in the world.
There was the movie kind of highlights. He got into some hot water actually.
What do you mean?
During his time as an exorcist, he was sent out to a village in Italy,
Mhm.
and this man was incredibly demonically possessed, and he was on his deathbed, basically, speaking in tongues. So he was an Italian man, right? And all of a sudden, he could speak English, and he was speaking English with Father Amort, and Father Amort learned its name. Once he learned its name, he started taunting that specific demon. I forget the exact name,
Mhm.
but one of his assistants brought well, it was like a farm village, so there was a pig on a leash kind of outside in a pen. He brought that pig inside of the house, tempted the spirit that was inside this man to jump inside of the pig, saying, you won't do this, you're not powerful, you don't have the strength, I don't believe in you.
Like
And
taunting it, yeah.
basically, yeah, the demon took the bait, jumped inside of the pig was screeching, and then one of the farmers took a 12 gauge to its head and basically killed the pig, but the man was cured. And in the movie, it highlights this, and they actually brought him back, and they said, "You performed an exorcism without our approval. What the heck are you doing?" And I believe at that time, even the Catholic Church was saying, your services aren't really needed. The devil isn't really real. So there was even like a fracture inside of the church. Like, hey, we don't want to preach these like negative things. But Father Mort was always kind of stalwart, and he's like, no, the devil is absolutely real. The worst, I believe the movie begins with the quote, the worst thing that you can do is not believe in the devil. Because if you don't believe in the devil's going to mess with you. If you do believe in the devil, that means you also believe in God, and it's harder for the devil to mess with you. That was basically his ideology behind it all. So he would go around saying, hey, we need to understand that like this isn't some symbolism here. This isn't, do good deeds because, and it represents God. Bad deeds represent the devil. It's just kind of a human way to kind of interpret that, or help me out here. Basically, like a creation story.
Yeah. No, I don't know what you're talking about. It's
Good
like,
versus evil.
yeah, it's like in regards of like when the Ten Commandments were written, like a structural rules set forth for society, and using these symbols as like driving forces to align them, with what this religious ideology wanted in society. Do this because it's good, do this, don't do this because it's bad. And he really held strong convictions, like you said, regarding the reality of the devil and demonic possession.
So there's actually he had a collection of items that during his exorcisms he claimed that the victims of these demonically possessed individuals actually barfed these things up, and they came out of their mouth. You can look it up. It's
Yeah.
That was his account. I don't, even me, I'm kind of hard pressed to believe that. But he had items like toys and just and weird, just random objects like lighters. Just tiny things that would like come out of people's throats, like they're manifested. That's kind of what we go into. Like his description of the exorcisms that he performed in his career. They included these like extremely dramatic manifestations, like coughing up physical objects, like toys or little knickknacks, just random things. But in every single one, that specific item that the person coughed up had some like significance to that victim. Other than that, dramatic manifestations, violent reactions. There's actually a documentary on him on YouTube, which I wish we could show if it weren't for copyright, but I would recommend anybody listening to this to research Father more on their own. And the last exorcism he performed was, I believe, in like 2017, 2018. It was the last one he did before he unfortunately passed away. And after watching that, and just our experiences kind of with Hill House and Toby and the way it sounds, people start speaking in multiple tones at the same time.
Like layers.
I'd be hard pressed to believe. And the production of the video is just like on some dude's phone, or like, it's like a camera inside of a room, and they agreed to document this exorcism. And it's I don't think it's fake. I don't think it's fake at all.
No, I don't either, but I think a lot of people will think that all exorcisms are like super dramatic. But I just wanted to touch on the fact that, his ideologies in regards to exorcisms was not that everything's going to be like physical manifestations, like, the exorcism of Emily Rose, like crawling down the stairs backwards and projectile vomiting and head spinning around in circles. Like, there's stories that say that, demons can make human beings do all sorts of crazy, unnatural things, superhuman strength, like you said, talking in tongues, multiple voices, all these different things. For example, when Ed and Lorraine Warren did their investigation of the Devil's Rocking Chair, Lorraine Warren said that there was like 30 plus demons inside of the little kid, and that they would talk all at the same time. Now, I heard that audio, and I'm sure you heard it too, at the Zach Bagans Museum.
Actually,
they didn't have it.
Show me.
They didn't have it at the Zach Bagans Museum.
I probably forgot. I don't know. That was going through the museum in itself. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but when the chair comes out of the wall, they play a recording from Ed Lorraine Warren with David Glatzel, who was like a 10-year-old kid, and he just sounds like it's like a bunch of different voices at the same time. But they're not all dramatic. Like, he had a very important, to him was very important that it's not only the physical, but like the spiritual, like saving the soul of the individual, not to stop these physical manifestations. Like the physical manifestations were something that just came with it, but his main focus was to preserve the spirit and the integrity of the spirit of the individual possessed. But I think what was interesting is that he was one of the only exorcists, if not the only exorcist at the time, that had a very big, or placed a big importance on getting medical and psychiatric help for the possessed. You know what I mean?
Right. So, in some of his interviews and even the movie himself, he's like, in the movie, he says less than 1% of the cases I deal with actually need my help. It's a psychiatric problem. It requires medical attention. This person has a psychiatric or mental disorder. And he insisted that medical intervention and psychiatric help were necessary compliments, even to when he confirmed that this is indeed a demonic possession and his services are required. He would not perform an exorcism until they've ruled absolutely everything out. So he would work alongside doctors and psychologists to provide comprehensive care for the possessed. So he was an honest man. He wouldn't go in. He wasn't about theatrics. He's like, I'm not going to perform this sacred rite unless it's absolutely confirmed. So he was a bit of an investigator, a bit of a detective in that regard as well. So a very fascinating and multifaceted individual who carried out his work with integrity, I would say.
Yeah, and what's interesting about exorcisms, like I think if you ever watched the Zach Bagans Demon House documentary, I know
I don't like watching that actually, because I always want to watch it before I go to bed, and it's not the best time to watch it.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't like Zach Bagans, but that's actually a pretty good documentary. But he says in the documentary, there's only a handful of exorcists in the United States. I don't know how many there are in Europe, but I would assume it's the same way because
I feel like there might be more in Europe. We'll have to do some research into that.
Yeah, I didn't look that up before we did this, but I know there's only a handful, like less than 20 in the entire United States. But that's because the certification requires the approval of, yes, Rome and the Vatican, right? But they want to make sure, or it's said that they want to make sure that these individuals aren't just like jumping the gun and going out there and doing this sacred rite, because that's what it is, right? It's a deliverance from God to like remove this, demonic force from a person. It's not taken lightly. So like you said, he was an investigator going out there, making sure, doing psychological evaluations, asking questions, getting with doctors, having them come out and do blood pressure and checks and all these things, make sure that they weren't ill, which was causing some sort of psychosis within the individual, so on and so forth. But he definitely undoubtedly, shaped the discourse around exorcisms. He was instrumental in bringing exorcisms into the mainstream conversation and challenging skepticism. But he offered unique, detailed accounts and firsthand glimpses into the experiences and challenges of an exorcist.
Very firsthand. The documentary, has legitimate exorcism being performed that you can go watch after this. But on that note, with his influence and kind of bringing exorcism into the mainstream, or not the mainstream, but not being afraid to talk about it and being very honest about his beliefs. He's come out with several books before he passed away. And I've heard they're a very good read, and they document a lot of his exorcisms, a lot of his noteworthy ones. And it's kind of a discourse on exorcism. And in that, he was kind of instrumental in bringing exorcism, like we said, into the mainstream conversation, challenging that skepticism. And the influence extends beyond literature and has permeated popular culture. I mean, a movie just came out this year. The Exorcism has always been a cult classic, right? But we're seeing it kind of carry on. It's just something that humanity has always been fascinated with. And especially in the portrayal of exorcism in movies and books, it's kind of given them an added layer of authenticity. It makes these narratives more chilling. I know Hollywood likes to add. And if you go see The Pope's Exorcist, I guarantee you, not everything that you see on the silver screen actually happened.
It's with Russell Crowe plays him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because he looks nothing like him in the flesh, right? But it's something about Father Amorth they highlight in the movie. He doesn't believe in sugar. He believes it's an extension of the devil. But he liked to drink whiskey. He always had a flask of whiskey on him.
Is there sugar in whiskey? Don't you have to make, or no? I don't
Yeah,
know.
he was kind of hypocritical in that regard, but that was the movie. Whether that expresses his real world view or not, I don't know. That was just something they might have twisted in, but it's funny.
Yeah, but on the note of the literature, like in his experiences, what a lot of people don't know is if you know anything, you've heard of him or know a little bit about him, like his interactions out there on scene, if you will, doing these sacred rites legitimately stirred up the entire way that the Catholic Church viewed possessions, like the implications, like how to go about it, like all these things. And it started to spark this like debate within the church. So what had happened is when he started publishing these things, bringing back findings, recordings, audio recordings, in the later years when videos started, coming out, um, they started to talk inside the church, and he literally, taught the Catholic Church how to do exorcisms. Like he was that one subject matter expert that he said, "Hey, like it's like when you have a job and you have people, I've been working here for 30 years." And you're like, "All right, well, you're doing this wrong. I've only been here for 5 years, but like there's a much better way to do this." It was kind of like that, to where he was like, "Okay, I'm the one going out here doing all these exorcisms. Y'all are just this figurehead that's pushing this thing. Oh, it's real. You must do this. Find God, all these things." But he's like, "No, like I'm boots on the ground out here doing this, and this is what I'm finding. So we need to reconsider what we're doing." And his impact is now seen in the way that modern exorcists um, go about their practices. He really left a long-lasting legacy even after he was gone.
And with that legacy, you know, might have been controversial. It seems like, you know, the people always get more famous after they passed away. He recently passed away. I forget the exact year, but it wasn't that long ago. While his legacy was controversial then, I would say it serves as an intriguing exploration of faith, skepticism, and overall the human experience and our fascination and the paranormal or the demonic or spirits or ghosts or what have you. And his life and his work and the books, and now there's movies coming out about him. I think they're a testament to the power of belief,
Hmm.
regardless of whether one agrees with his views or not.
Yeah, and with the belief thing, it's like that's kind of how we are, like you and I don't actively go to church, right? But we believe in God and angels and demons and all that stuff. And every time that we let's for say go to Hill House, like with that power of belief, anointing ourselves with the oil, even though we're not like actively in the eyes of uh, uh, a steady churchgoer, they would be like, "Oh, well, you don't go and pray, on Sundays and all these things." Well, I don't have to, right? I mean, it's the power of belief, like regardless of who agrees with it or who doesn't, and it's kept us safe. Maybe we got lucky, but I think it legitimately is exactly that. The power of belief that these things are real and these anointing oils and these holy objects do work, and it keeps you safe.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not a Bible thumper. I'm not a church goer by any means, but I do have faith,
Yes.
right? And while my views might, you're talking about religion, you're always going to upset somebody somewhere.
Yeah.
My views are open minded, obviously, and but I do have a faith. As a higher power. Like, what is a higher power to you? What is God to you? Some people think it's gravity. Some people think it's Yahweh. Some people think it's the Holy Trinity. There's so many different ways you could chop it up. Um, but a faith in a power that's greater yourself. And I think one of the biggest things is realizing that you yourself are not the center of the universe, right? There's something, you're a part of a greater system. It kind of keeps you humble within life. And, and there, Toby is one of several demons, which I think we've come across, but Toby's probably one of the strongest ones. I think some of these manifestations we've come across, especially, I mean, in Yorktown, like you got scratched pretty bad. I remember that.
Yeah.
And then Hill House Manor, being able to physically see this being, right? He doesn't say a whole lot and he doesn't really touch you or hurt you, but you can see him there. And like most ghosts can't do that. And he doesn't look very handsome either. So,
Yeah, no, he's pretty ugly. Roy. Um,
That being said, we should probably go back to that place and try to kind of do a better investigation because we got more equipment. I think
Hill
there's
House
lots of
Manor?
evidence that could be. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's just a drive, man.
Yeah,
6.5
yeah,
hours. But no, it's I, I I don't know. I haven't read anything from him, but like my ideologies on like demonic forces are I've talked to you about it. I kind of view it in the way of Horcruxes in Harry Potter with Voldemort, if you've ever seen that.
yeah.
Like like with these forces, like if they're as powerful as projected, like these fallen angels or these spawns of fallen angels, so on and so forth, these supernatural, these non-human forces, that they have the ability to like store energy into objects and into places, like it's like a fragment. Like if there's anybody out watching that's ever played like the new one of the latest World of Warcraft patches, it's like the Echoes of Nyalotha. Like it's like this fragment of this being that has similar power to it, but it's not its power in full. Like it's like this omnipotent, like multifaceted thing that can project itself in multiple different ways. So people are like, oh, well, you're, if this was like a full blown demon, like, wouldn't it like, pick you up and throw you across the room? I was like, oh, well, maybe in full form, it could be able to do that. Like if it was an actual being, but what if this is just like a piece of it, like an echo, an image of this thing, and it's not as fully potential as its real being, but you still interact with it. I mean, who knows? Like we don't. I gave that example in when we did that podcast, the I Came With Fire podcast with Brandon. It's like looking through a faceted gemstone. Like we're only seeing that one piece. Like if you hold the gemstone up and look into the light, like there's 16 other facets that you can look through, right? But right now we're only seeing one, and then the next time you might see the other, and so on and so forth. I kind of think that they're the same way.
That being said, you're speaking of, I guess we'll call them Horcruxes. I hope we don't get in trouble for copyright, but a fragment of a being, right? Have you had experiences with that? Because I personally haven't. So I feel like you're speaking from experience because I know you've been investigating a lot longer than me.
I just think like these things, like Hill House is just a perfect example because there's so many dark things there. Like we were talking about, like there have been people I've seen people maybe not like get possessed, right? Where they need like a deliverance or an exorcism, but I've seen people being taken over by these things, and I can't view them as human spirits. The energy and the interaction and what they do to people is just so much more intense than what I could imagine that a human spirit could be doing to someone. Like I know when people out there like, oh, there's bad human spirits. Like I know that. I get that. There's negative human spirits out there. But these things, like I'll give you an example. There was a woman that I was doing a tour with, and she was like talking crap like the whole time, and she was like calling out Toby and all these things and yada yada yada, like do this, you're blah 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 blah. And I was like, lady, you got to be freaking careful what you're doing right now. I was like, you do not know who you're talking to. I said, I'm not talking about just like Toby, like, oh, you better watch out who you're talking to. Like, literally, you have no idea what you're talking to. She's like, yeah, whatever. This place is a bunch of baloney, yada, yada, yada. And she walks out of one of the rooms, and she just grabs her throat and falls to the floor. And she started, oh
You
yeah,
were there in person and you saw this?
yeah, I was like standing right over her, and like she grabbed her throat and she fell down, and she was like dry heaving and coughing. She was like like something had like not just like choked her, but just had like completely shut her body down and just dropped her to the floor. And I was like, so I ran into the kitchen and I grabbed the holy water, and this was like more I was not fully convinced that God and the devil and angels and demons were real. But I was getting there, and I grabbed the holy water, and like we had somebody there that was religious, and she's like, give me that. And she like starts throwing the holy water and starts saying a prayer. And I don't know if it's subjective or whatever, but like after she did that, like she kind of came back too. Like she was still kind of holding her throat or whatever. There was no marks or anything, but that type of interaction is what I'm talking about. Like this thing, like ethereally was just able to just like, and just like a genie snapping their finger and just like, oh, you're gonna talk crap, cool, boop, and then drops to the floor, heaving, coughing. I mean, that doesn't seem human to me. That seems like really like evil, like incarnate, like the definition of, you know what I mean? So to answer your question,
what were her thought? I don't want to interrupt.
no, you're good. To answer your question,
What
like,
were her thoughts? Sorry. What were her thoughts? What did she say to you after? Did she have
she
a
was,
change of heart?
oh yeah, oh, she was super freaked out. She left. She was like, nah, I'm out. So yeah, like she left. She couldn't do it. And I had that conversation with a lot of people that go to these like very negative places, these places where cannot confirm if there's demonic forces here. Like I feel like we're pretty convinced that Toby is Asmodeus, right? But we can't be objectively sure. But I've had these conversations with people about like, hey, like you need to be careful when you go to these places, like because like we were talking about before. Um, when we kind of first got started with the reviving MP Paranormal, I was like, you may have a reality shifting event to where you, like you did with Toby, like where you're just like, I don't know if he's real. Like that's pretty interesting. And then it just went from 0 to 100, like really, really, really fast.
Let's say 300, man.
Yeah, 0 to 300, like really, really, really fast. And you're just like, wait, okay. That did not sound like a person. That did not sound like any human spirit I've ever heard before. That thing sounded gnarly and disgusting, and it had like 2 voices, and it told it was gonna kill us. You know what I mean? And you're just like, okay. That makes you start thinking about all these different things. Like, okay, like if this is this, we were just talking about Asmodeus. We read his description out of the Lesser Key of Solomon, and now he's telling us he's going to kill us because he's probably upset about the fact that we're trying to invoke him, or he thinks we're trying to invoke him. Start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. I've had a bunch of people do that, where they're just like, okay, this is too much. Like that cannot.
I would say with paranormal investigating, when you have that reality shifting event, sometimes it's good to just step away. Give it to your higher power, give it to whatever, and just hey, I'm safe. I don't have to understand this thing because it's kind of, the more you try to understand it, I think you can drive yourself a little mad trying to understand, scientifically anyway, like trying to process like how is this thing speaking to me right now, or trying to, I don't know, not the word justify, but trying to just understand, wrap your head around, come up with a theory, prescribe to a religion, what have you. It can become quite a lot. So sometimes it's just better to be like, hey, say a prayer, believe in your higher power, and the paranormal is hard to explain.
Yeah, it is. And whether you believe it or not, coming from our mouths, these things are real. That's why we wanted to talk about exorcisms and Father Amorth and kind of get on that conversation, just because we thought it'd be an interesting topic. But yeah, so we are out of time. If you like the conversation, I want to make sure that you leave us a comment, drop a like, let us know what you'd like, didn't like about the podcast. Like I said, it's our first episode, so trying to get smooth the wrinkles out. So whatever feedback that you have for us would be greatly appreciated. You will not hurt our feelings, I promise. And hey, hit the subscribe button, and we'll catch you all on the next one. See ya.